But now moving on, the next thing we need to talk about are rep ranges. Now I know that I touched upon this before earlier in the program, but now we're going to be taking a real deep dive into the topic of rep ranges so that you can most understand each one of them. So the first rep range we have is the 1 to 5 rep range. This is the strength and power rep range, which is done in strength training and power lifting. This rep range trains your body to become stronger by lifting the heaviest weights you can lift a small number of times. But while lifting the heaviest weight possible may seem like a cool thing to do, doing so few repetitions actually does not give you much of a workout and does not cause much hypertrophy and muscle growth. It is also the least healthy form of exercise and does more harm than good in most cases. Thus, it is best done sparingly, if at all, and is actually not even necessary for most people. You see, all this accomplishes is training your body to be able to lift heavy and training you to become stronger, which is why it's called strength training. So it's really only important if you actually need to become stronger for some functional reason. Okay, otherwise it's pretty superfluous. Now, there is a difference between strength training and powerlifting. All right, the type of training that is called powerlifting is done at the lowest end of the rep range, where people are basically trying to lift as much as they possibly can, only once or twice, or maybe 3 times tops. So the 1 to 3 rep range is powerlifting. And then the 3 to 5 or 6 rep range is called basic strength training. All right, so that's a little lighter and a little more technique oriented. Now these types of training are very different than hypertrophy training because unlike hypertrophy training, which is entirely about technique, strength and powerlifting are actually just about getting the weight from point A to point B as efficiently as possible. So the technique is not at all concerned with trying to maximize time under tension, maximize the technique in such a way as to make it harder, targeting specific parts of just one muscle. No, it's rather the opposite. The technique used here is actually about trying to make the lift as easy as possible and recruiting as many muscles possible in order for you to get the weight from point A to point B. So when you're performing this style of training and this rep range, it is not very hypertrophic. All right, this type of training is not done for the purpose of building muscle. It is simply for the purpose of getting stronger, training your body to be able to move those heavy weights. Okay, and this is very important for anyone who does need to get stronger, since you're only going to get stronger by doing the thing that you need to be stronger at. But if you wish to get both more strong and more muscular, you can of course combine strength training with hypertrophy training. Okay, they can and do go together. But as I said, if you don't really need to get stronger, there's no reason to be doing strength training because this type of training has more cons than pros. Okay, the downsides and dangers far outweigh any positive benefits you get out of being able to lift heavier weight. All right, especially if it's not something you need to do for your profession, then there's really no upsides, okay? Lifting so heavy that you cannot lift the weight more than a few times comes with a very high injury proclivity and is very hard on the body. All right, and when you are training like this consistently over time, it will be wearing your body down more and more until you reach a point in which you have too many aches and pains and have been too worn down to continue training the same way. So this type of training is not sustainable. You're only going to be able to do it for so long before your body says it can't do it anymore. And even when you are not hurting yourself, lifting heavy has a poor stimulus to fatigue ratio, which is something I'm going to teach you about later on. But to sum it up, that means that while you are producing more stimulus by lifting more weight, you are producing exponentially more fatigue. So you might produce this much more stimulus, but this much more fatigue. So with strength training, you are depleting your energies faster over the course of a shorter time. And this means that you are getting a worse workout in the short time you are spending working out, and that your recovery is going to take longer and be harder. So with strength training, you actually have to train less, and thus it will take longer to make strength training adaptations than if you were doing optimized hypertrophy training, where you'd be able to make those adaptations much faster. And one of the reasons you need to train less frequently with strength training is because this fatigue accumulates from workout to workout. So if you are doing too much strength training, you'll find that over time, at some point, you will have accumulated so much fatigue that instead of gaining strength, you actually begin to lose it. So in the end, strength training is done for a shorter period of time and less frequency than hypertrophy training, and thus it does not produce much hypertrophy, so you won't have much to show for it. Unless you need strength for your profession, imagine if you are a fireman or a competitive athlete or something like that where you need that strength, then you will have something to show for it. But if not, you're basically just going into the gym, training yourself to lift heavy so that sooner rather than later you end up having to give up strength training for another type of training and then losing your strength. All right, so this type of training is basically self-defeating unless you need it for your sport or career, and it's best to minimize the amount of sets you do in this rep range. So while it is beneficial to train for strength some of the times here and there so that you can make those strength adaptations when you need them in your training year, it's best to only do this type of training as much as you absolutely need it. And it's advisable when you do it to stay at the high end of the rep range and go for 4 or 5 reps rather than always training for your 1 or 2 rep max, all right? Because the more reps you can do, the better workout you are getting and the more hypertrophy you are causing, as well as less fatigue and less aches and potential injury. Now the next rep range after that is the 5 to 10 rep range, and any rep range above that is going to be more hypertrophic, okay? The hypertrophy rep ranges are the 5 to 30 rep range.